Imagine you're part of an ambitious expedition, setting sail for the vast, uncharted Arctic. The year is 1913. The ship is the Karluk, and its leader, the famed explorer Vilhjalmur Stephenson, promises glory and discovery. You're part of the Canadian Arctic expedition, a mission to map unknown lands and claim them for the British Empire. Excitement is in the air. Little do you know, this journey into the brilliant white north will soon descend into a year-long nightmare of ice, isolation, and madness. This is the harrowing story of the Karluk, a voyage that began with scientific dreams but ended as one of the most terrifying survival sagas ever recorded. As the Karluk pushed north, past the coast of Alaska, the mood was optimistic. The crew of 25, a mix of seasoned sailors, scientists, and even an Inuit family with 2 young daughters, were eager to begin their work. Their mission was twofold. A northern party, led by Stephenson himself, would venture across the sea ice in search of new continents, while a southern party would conduct research along Canada's northern coast. The Karluk was their floating home and base of operations, packed with enough supplies for 3 years. But the Arctic is a fickle and unforgiving master. Before they could even reach their destination, their plans began to unravel. In August, just a few weeks into their journey, the first warning signs appeared. The sea ice, which should have been retreating, began to close in around them. The ship's engine strained against the growing pressure, but it was no use. By September, the Karluk was completely and utterly trapped. The ice wasn't just floating. It was a vast moving sheet, a frozen river carrying the ship westward, deeper into the desolate Arctic Ocean. They were hundreds of miles from land, adrift in a sea of white. The ship that was meant to be their fortress had become their prison. Days turned into weeks, and the crew could only watch as the ice thickened around them, its grip tightening like a vice. Their expedition was over before it had even truly begun. They were now at the mercy of the ice. With the ship immobilized, Stephenson, ever the ambitious explorer, saw an opportunity. He announced that he, along with a small hunting party, would venture out onto the ice to hunt for caribou to supplement their rations. He assured the crew he would only be gone for about 10 days. He appointed the ship's captain, Robert Bartlett, a veteran of Arctic voyages, as commander in his absence. On September 20, 1913, Stephenson and his party departed, promising a swift return. They were never seen by the crew of the Karluk again. A sudden blizzard descended, and when it cleared, the ship had been carried so far west by the moving ice pack that a reunion was impossible. Whether Stephenson intentionally abandoned his crew to continue his own explorations or was genuinely separated by the storm remains a topic of debate to this day. But for the 25 people left on the Karluk, the grim reality was setting in. They were alone. Now under the command of Captain Bartlett, the crew faced a daunting future. The Arctic winter was closing in. The sun dipped lower on the horizon each day until it vanished completely, plunging them into the perpetual darkness of the polar night. Temperatures plummeted to an unimaginable -40 degrees Celsius. The ship groaned and shuddered under the immense pressure of the ice. To pass the time and maintain morale, Bartlett organized routines. The men played cards, the scientists cataloged their specimens, and the 2 young Inuit girls played on the deck, their laughter a stark contrast to the crushing silence of the frozen world around them. They built shelters on the ice, just in case the worst happened, naming their makeshift camp Shipwreck Camp. They were preparing for a long, dark winter, hoping the spring thaw would eventually set them free. But the Arctic had other plans. The pressure on the Karluk's hull was relentless. The sound of splintering wood became a constant, terrifying companion. On January 10, 1914, a massive pressure ridge slammed into the ship. A deafening crack echoed across the ice as a long gash was torn open in the Karluk's side. Seawater rushed in, and the pumps couldn't keep up. Captain Bartlett gave the order everyone had been dreading: abandon ship. In the freezing darkness, the crew scrambled to save what supplies they could, moving everything to the relative safety of Shipwreck Camp. They watched in horror as their vessel, their last connection to the civilized world, slowly succumbed to the ice. The next morning, the Karluk's bow rose high into the air before the ship slipped beneath the frozen sea, vanishing forever. Now, they were truly castaways, stranded on a moving island of ice. With the ship gone, their situation grew desperate. Captain Bartlett knew their only hope for survival was to reach land. The nearest solid ground was Wrangel Island, a desolate, uninhabited rock over 100 miles away. But getting there meant a treacherous journey across a landscape of shifting, unstable sea ice, filled with treacherous open water leads and towering pressure ridges. The group was divided. A party of 4 men, led by the ship's first officer, believed they could reach land more quickly on their own. Despite Bartlett's warnings, they set off, convinced of their own path. They were never seen again. Another group of 4, including 2 men who were already ill, also broke away, but they too vanished into the white wilderness. The expedition was beginning to fracture, and the death toll was rising. Bartlett knew he had to act decisively to save the rest. He organized the remaining survivors, including the Inuit family, and began the grueling march towards Wrangel Island. It was an ordeal beyond imagination. They dragged heavy sleds loaded with supplies, navigating the treacherous, ever-changing ice. Frostbite was a constant threat, and the physical and mental toll was immense. After 2 long, agonizing months, in March 1914, they finally stumbled onto the shores of Wrangel Island. They had made it to land, but their ordeal was far from over. Wrangel Island was a barren wasteland of rock and ice, offering little in the way of shelter or food. They had traded a prison of moving ice for a stationary one. Survival on Wrangel Island was brutal. Food was scarce, consisting of the occasional polar bear or seal the Inuit hunters managed to kill. But as the weeks stretched on, tensions mounted and despair set in. Some of the men grew resentful and desperate. The bonds of camaraderie that had held them together began to fray, replaced by suspicion and paranoia. The psychological strain of their isolation, the constant hunger, and the gnawing uncertainty of rescue began to take its toll. Men who had once been colleagues now saw each other as rivals for survival. The civility they had maintained was stripped away, revealing a much darker side of human nature. Stories from the survivors' journals hint at theft, conflict, and a complete breakdown of order. The island was becoming a stage for a slow, agonizing descent into madness. Knowing that no one would ever find them on this remote island, Captain Bartlett made an incredible, heroic decision. He would not wait for a rescue that might never come. He would go and get it himself. Taking one of the Inuit hunters, Karluk, with him, Bartlett set off on an almost suicidal mission. Their plan was to cross 100 miles of treacherous sea ice back to the Siberian coast, and then travel hundreds of miles overland to find help. It was a journey of over 700 miles through some of the harshest terrain on Earth. They faced polar bears, open water, and blinding blizzards. It was a feat of endurance and courage that ranks among the greatest in polar history. After weeks of travel, miraculously, they reached the Siberian coast and eventually made it to a small village, and from there, to Alaska. Bartlett had done it. He could now send for a rescue. But back on Wrangel Island, time was running out. While Bartlett was on his epic journey, the remaining survivors were fighting a losing battle. Sickness, starvation, and despair claimed more lives. Of the group left behind, several more would perish. The journals kept by the men paint a grim picture of their final months, a slow, agonizing wait, with hope dwindling each day. The cold was relentless, and the hunger was a constant, gnawing pain. When the rescue ship, the King and Winch, finally arrived on September 7, 1914, almost a year after the Karluk had sunk, they found a harrowing scene. Only 12 of the original 25 who were left with the ship had survived. They were skeletal, gaunt figures with hollow eyes, men and women haunted by what they had endured and what they had witnessed. The joy of rescue was overshadowed by the profound loss and the deep scars, both physical and psychological, that would never fully heal. In total, 11 people from the Karluk expedition perished. The story became a chilling footnote in the heroic age of polar exploration, a stark reminder of the unforgiving power of nature and the fragility of human ambition. Vilhjalmur Stefansson, the man who started it all, went on to have a long and celebrated career as an explorer, though his decision to leave the Karluk has been debated by historians ever since. Captain Bartlett was hailed as a hero for his incredible journey to bring back help. The survivors returned to a world that could never truly understand what they had been through. The legacy of the Karluk is a powerful and haunting tale of survival against impossible odds. But it is also a dark exploration of what happens when the veneer of civilization is stripped away, leaving only the raw, desperate will to live. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the frozen heart of the Arctic. The story of the Karluk is a testament to both the incredible resilience and the profound darkness that can exist within the human spirit. If you found this story as compelling as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more tales from the most extreme corners of history. Let me know in the comments what you think about Stephenson's actions. We'll see you in the next video.